A couple of people I'm gonna invite on stage here in just a second have just done the simple thing of paying attention to what God is inviting them to do. And so as we listen in on their story, I want you to keep thinking, what's God inviting me to do? What's the next thing I want to say yes to God about? I think you're gonna find some real energy and inspiration in the story of my friends, Allie and Curtis. Can you welcome them up right now? So, like I said, as much as and as helpful as stories of the scripture are, there's also some 21st century stories that help us. Thanks for hanging out with us. This is Allie. This is Curtis, in case you didn't know which was which. And listen, we're going to actually start with Allie's story for a little while. So it's going to seem like I'm ignoring Curtis, which is not true. We're longtime friends, so I don't feel bad about it at all.
I'm used to it.
You may know Curtis. Curtis was on staff for a number of years with us and does some really important work outside the church right now, even though they're still part of the church here. And they've found their way into this story most recently, but it's Allie's story that we start with that helps us into this, right? Years ago, Allie was in Las Vegas doing work in the foster care system, and God started to kind of reveal what was ahead of you. Tell us how that began.
So when I was young, I was called to work in foster care and adoption. I always knew that's what I wanted to do. So when I became an adult and I got a chance to work with children in foster care, it was sort of the fulfillment of that first calling. I was working with kids in foster care in Las Vegas, and they were all placed with their relatives. So it was their grandma or their great aunt or their cousin. Some sort of family had stepped up and said yes to caring for a child who couldn't live with their parents. And while working with those children, I noticed a really big gap in the support that the family was receiving. I noticed two things. I noticed that the children were doing great because they were with someone who they knew and who loved them, but the caregivers who stepped up were having a hard time. And so I started looking into kinship care a little bit more.
Yeah. So in the midst of the foster system, obviously when they can't live at home, we've got to find somewhere for them to land. Landing with families, but there was a gap, right? And there was one family in particular where this gap became so apparent. Tell us about this family that kind of changed your life.
This was a family that changed my life. So it was a beautiful set of 4 kids, siblings from 3 to 12. And they had witnessed their mother murdered. She was shot in front of them in sort of the most horrific trauma that I could have imagined at the time. And they ended up living at Child Haven, which is the place where children go when there's no home for them. And a great aunt stepped up and took all 4 kids into her home and committed to taking care of them after they'd experienced this horrible trauma. And what I saw working with the kids, because I was in that home multiple times a week for 6 months, the kids started healing. They were able to stay together. They stayed in their same schools, church, neighborhood with the family that was healthy. And they started making incredible progress.
Yeah,
but
forgive me.
Go ahead.
So a great aunt who is just living life goes one day doing life to the next day, 4 kids from 3 to 12 enter her home and just has to figure out how that's going to work over 6 months, right? And you're saying awesome for the kids, best case scenario, like in just a devastating situation, right? But you were probably going to tell us, how did that go for the great aunt?
So I saw her, she lost her job because she had to spend so much time transporting the children to all of their appointments, as of course that was expected. She was draining her savings to put food on the table and to take care of them. And she finally reached out and was asking for help. She was asking for help from a system that automatically helps foster parents like me when, if I take a child, we get supported financially and we also get trained. And she hadn't received any of those things. And so she did reach out and ask for that help.
So if someone's willing to take in a child who's not part of their family, there's all kinds of support. You said financial and training. Yeah. But if a family member does, it's kind of like, good luck, I got this. Mm-hmm. And so she spent 6 months just running ragged, trying to figure this out. And she finally reached out for some partnership and really didn't find much in the system.
Yeah, she reached out for help and was told, because you are not able to do this financially, we're going to come and remove the children and place them in foster care. And that was the answer she got to asking for help.
Likely separated and likely with people who were not their family.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you're sitting here having just said yes to the calling of stepping into these hard situations in foster and realizing it's actually way harder. There were things way harder about this than you could have imagined, right?
It was an absolute life-changing moment when that was the answer was, we're going to just take the children from you. And it was the moment that my life changed, because I started thinking, no, you can't do that. What can we do? And how can we support family that step up? So I had this light bulb moment in a Starbucks parking lot. I was talking to my mom on the phone, and I said, can I have, I think we need to raise some money. And I also think that maybe we need to make sure that this isn't happening to other families. And so the first thing I did was figure out how to get that aunt some help, because those kids were staying there.
Yeah, so listen, you said yes to foster care. Now you're like, listen, this is a gap that can't stand. There's no way we're going to take these kids if there's anything we can do. So you start rallying up partnerships from people and family and friends, getting resources together to help this family settle in. And tell us what happened with the family.
So we did. We were able to figure out some of the issues the family was having financially. We stabilized them, and she was able to go on and adopt the children and receive the support. So it was a happy ending there.
Yeah.
But it was that same moment where we said, oh, good for them.
I think maybe I know this story turned your life. You've told this story many times, but we're all just like, oh my gosh, right? We're experiencing this story for the first time, and so we're so glad to hear that there are happy endings, right?
It was a happy ending, and at the same time, it changed my life, because I thought, is this happening to other families? And I didn't know. And so I started looking into kinship care and the support available and how many kids there might be in the similar situation. And what I found was that this story wasn't an outlier. This was normal. And in fact, there were 30,000 children in our state alone living with their relatives with no parents, and there was really no support and resources. So it was at that point that I felt like I couldn't look away, and I had to keep going down a path that I hadn't necessarily planned to go down.
Yeah. Allie, I know you're a person of faith, you're a Jesus follower, and so in the midst of all this, you'd already said so many yeses, but I think we said you spent a year like researching this need and trying to figure out what this is, and you're going to say another yes in a minute, but how did you know God was stirring you? Like, we're inviting everyone to think about what's their next step and what God is stirring in them. How did you know God was inviting you to do something in this direction?
It's that voice in your head that doesn't come from you. Oswald Chambers describes the go of God. It's that feeling like, oh, I have to do this thing. Why me? And it's, okay or disobey. So for me, it was a clear okay, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I did spend some time researching kinship care, nonprofits, everything, because I wanted to do it, be of service. But I said yes, but I was afraid.
Yeah. Well, I think that's real, right? Like, if we're really going to live into what God has for us, there's going to be like ambiguity. There's going to be fear. There's going to be like, what I'm supposed to do is becoming clear. How I'm supposed to do it, not as clear, right? And so, I mean, how did you begin? You did all this research. You looked into it for a year. What did you decide to do?
I did a lot of research. We finally opened our first office after about a year, and I found my first partners, really were my kinship families that came forward and said, please hear our story. This is what's happening to us. And I found, kinship in their stories and partnership with them. And that's what has continued to drive the work forward, is just working with families alongside them.
Yeah, we've been saying partners go together, and this is all over your story. I hope people will stop by and get to hear more of it. But listen, the families that you served, you were not doing things for them. You were doing things with them, right? There were things that you brought and things that they brought, and when you put all the best of that together, you guys started putting some solutions together, launched a whole nonprofit, right? Many of your staff, I believe, are people who have stepped into this, right? And
they are, yes. They have experienced themselves with kinship care and foster care.
Yeah. So I just want to point at some things along the way here quickly. Is like, there was a yes to like serving in a challenging part of society, right? Because God had invited you to do this, right? Seeing a need and saying yes without clear answers. Inviting, this great aunt invites partners, finds none. So you step in to partner with her and grab your crew and step in and help this family forward. And then to launch what you have launched now, you started rallying people up in partnership along the way, right? You didn't have everything, but you had people. Right? And so you stepped into this.
I really felt like I almost had nothing, but I had a direction. And it always feels that way on this path of feeling like I have to take a step forward, and then the support comes. That's what I've been given, is the next step. And then people come alongside and partner. And it is more than I don't plan it. It just happens amazingly.
Yeah. what you need to do, you don't always know how. You have a way that you say this that we really love.
Yeah, so I always feel when I'm at a big decision, I'm at the edge of a stage or a cliff, and I just want the ground to be there so I know where I'm going and I can step onto something solid. And it isn't there until I take that step of faith and I step out into the unknown, and suddenly that ground comes and meets my step. And so it's that step of faith that gets me to the next place, not me waiting for it to come before I do it.
Did y'all catch that? I love it, right? That when you're willing to take the step that God invites you to take, the ground comes up to meet you.
Yes, it does.
Right? And so, man, we always want the other order. That's not how it works. For 10 years, the ground has been coming up to meet you, right? Tell us where Foster Kinship, this nonprofit organization that you do to serve families, where are you at today?
So where we are today is it's not just me in a dangerous office by the airport. We have 2 really great family resource centers across the state. There's 25 people that have come alongside to support me with our programs, and we've been able to serve 15,000 children and make sure that home is in the family for those kids. Thank you.
If you're in the room right now, would you just look across the whole span of the room? Just look across. If you look across and you had time to count all the seats in this room, you'd count about 3,000 seats in this room. So imagine lining kids up and walking them in to fill every seat in this room till the room was totally full. 5 times. Those are kids who experienced massive trauma and change in their lives, of families who were just not in a place, biological parents who were not in a place to care for them, who were able to find care with people that they knew within the scope of their family or friendships that would have no support, but now have had substantial resources and support because long ago you said yes, and you took a step and the ground came up to meet you.
Yes,
right?
it did. Yes.
Can we just celebrate that one more time? That's awesome. Now listen, here's the thing, is that we love celebrating the end of the story, but don't miss the story comes one step at a time. Just like across the scripture, we imagine all the stories came together, but that's not true. This guy named Abram was called to leave his land, and he said, go here, and he celebrated and met God there, and then God said, go here, and he said yes, and he said, go here, and he said yes. And over time, God arranges this massive group of people. Same with Moses. Every leader across the scripture, we read the story from the end, but it's not. It always unfolds from the beginning with ambiguity, right? And just a yes, followed by a yes, followed by a yes.
And can I just mention too, those first yeses, you're usually pretty alone. There's no one clapping and cheering you on when you're saying yes for those first times, and that is okay. You just do it. If you feel that call, you have to step forward.
Yeah, I love it. Listen, so Curtis found his way into this story just recently, actually. So you get to hear the unfolding decade-long story of Allie. Curtis's story in this partnership is really only a couple of weeks old. Partnership doesn't always complicate it. Sometimes we need the story from the beginning. So you recently just started partnering with Foster Kinship. How does that work?
Yeah, so a couple weeks ago, they had their first kind of celebration, gala, fundraiser. And my wife and I got to go. We got invited, and so it was really my first experience with Foster Kinship. And so we had a chance to go, enjoy the evening, and you've been sitting here listening to Allie talk about it, and so it's a no-brainer that we're there on this night, and we start to hear more and more. We hear these life-changing stories, and stories about people making a difference in the lives of others, and those are the kind of stories that I think grip us all in some way. And so it was a no-brainer at the end of that night for us to kind of hop in and say, okay, this is a great first step for us. It's a great first step for us to say yes, to be a part of something that's in our community, that's within our city, and that's making a difference in the lives of kids and families. We're not the heroes of this story at all, but it really is just a reminder to say, hey, it was a simple ask, and it was a simple way for us to partner, to say yes and to hop in. And so we were able to contribute that night, and it was a pleasure for us to do that. I think, like I said, I'm a sucker for great stories. I love hearing about people that take a step and make a difference, and all of these things came together that night. And so it made a lot of sense for us to go, yes, let's hop in with Foster Kinship.
So partnership started really simple for you.
Yeah.
Offering some attention and then saying that we'll partner with you and be financial supporters of what God is up to in the work that you're doing, right? Simple beginning to partnership.
Yeah.
But talk to us just a little bit about how you went from looking in through the window to be like, I want in. I want to start. I want to say yes to partnering with them.
Well, it's proximity. I think I grew up a lot. I grew up back east, and I remember people in my family taking over and taking care of kids for a little bit, and I just thought nothing of it. It made sense, right? Hey, my family's gonna look out for my family. But then as you get closer to these situations and you're made aware, there's this proximity thing that comes up, and now you have a better understanding of what's going on, that there is no support, that they're draining their savings, that, it's difficult for people in different seasons of life to keep up with kids that are in a younger season of life. And so when you start to hear all that, and that proximity and understanding changes things, you realize this is something that I get to be a part of in a way that helps make a difference in the lives of other people. And so the proximity changes it, the stories, and the way that we're able to make a difference by saying yes to that really brings about that next step and says, okay, there's this step, and then what's next, right? What's the next step?
Yeah, totally. Listen, we can't do everything. You look at a challenge like the foster care system and families that are just in struggle. There's so many aspects and so many different complications in that. We can't do everything. The question is not what is everything that can be done. The question should be, what can I do? Right? There's maybe a million things we can't do, but there's some things we can do, and you guys said yes. Just as we look in on this for right now, like, you've said yes to like partnering financially, but like, what is that doing in you? You've said yes to a partnership. Partnership isn't just about the difference we make in others, it is also about a difference it makes in us. What difference is it making in you?
Yeah, so I think that next piece is the advocacy part. I travel a lot for the work I do now, and I get to be a part of events, and I was a part of an event a couple weeks ago, and it was an event that was centered around caring for children, and I'm attenuated a little bit more. My ears perk up a little bit more now because I'm aware and I have this understanding of what's going on. And as a result, we advocate just in conversations with people. Like now it's something that when we're around other people that we might see in a similar situation, or we come across people, we find ourselves talking about the experience that we had that night, and then ultimately the stories that we hear as a result of foster kinship and what they're doing. So now we're just inadvertently, without even thinking about it, advocating for them in our circle of people because we've been made aware. And we have a chance to share about that, and not even with the intent of like, hey, come along and financially partner, but it now becomes who we are. Yeah. And we were talking about it at dinner last night, just because this is what we do now. We understand, we're made aware, we've taken action, and now we get to advocate in our everyday lives.
Yeah. This simple window into partnership, we're just stirring the pot as much as we can for all of us. God has a next step in front of all of us for a simple way to say yes. We don't need to know the 10-year story. The 2-week story is the one right in front of us. So how do we just keep saying yes to the thing in front of us? Now, we've used this as an example of partnership, but we actually have been partnering foster kinship for a number of years here with Canyon Ridge. And so, listen, if people have been inspired by what you're doing, right? Like Curtis was drawn into the story of what you're doing, right? We're not all originators of vision. Sometimes we jump into other people's teams, right? So if people want to jump on your team, how could they do that like right away?
A couple of really easy ways. We are always, always, always in need of diapers, and that's a simple way for us to build trust with our families, is being able to give them something they need. We need people's time to come and work at our donation center, Marcy's Heart, and help us give items out for free to families. And then I just need more awareness. If you have kinship families in your life or you run into one, please take my information and provide it to them so that they know help is available and they are not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, a few weeks ago or a month ago or so, we talked about Project 150 when we said, hey, go buy some jeans. And let me just tell you, the wall of men's jeans that they needed at Project 150 were full like that day because of the people of Canyon Ridge. Yeah, that's awesome. So today, diapers, everybody. Let's just load up diapers. Take them to foster kinship, bring them back here, like go get them, bring them back, run down to Small Mart or wherever you got to go down here to grab some. It's a little Walmart right down the road, Small Mart. or wherever you like to shop. I don't care, but grab some, like parents, can we just get a head nod how desperate it is to reach into a box of diapers and there's none there, right? And then you have to go look at the cost of diapers and realize this is like your 4th box this week or whatever. Let's not let that be the case for these families. Let's load up on diapers. You can bring them here and we'll deliver if you don't know where to take them. Just drop them by this week. We're gonna try to load up with diapers. If you have time, jump into their donation center and be an advocate. Sometimes people who are in this situation are just trying to find their way forward and they don't know where to look, and there is a place to look for help and support. So if you were inspired or encouraged by Allie and Curtis, can we just show our gratitude real quick? Thanks so much. Appreciate it.